we are continuing with the roles or the different occupations that engineers may have in the industry. Some of these roles we have already gone through them, like electronics engineer, electronics design engineer, sales engineer. We have really spent time on talking about sales engineer. So the right now we want to discuss electrical engineer, power systems, or the one we can call power systems engineer. So we can also be called power engineer. All those are terms that you might find in the industry. But for your simplicity, let's just call them power systems engineer. So we say that this engineer designs power system facilities. You are designed to design power system engineer power system facilities and equipment and coordinates construction, operation, and maintenance of power generating, receiving, distribution, transmission, and distribution systems and equipment. So again, remember we talked about the three phases of power production and distribution, and we said that power is generated first, then it is transmitted, and then distributed. So talk about distribution stations, transmission lines, and distribution systems like transformers and equipment. That is the work that that power systems engineer do. And when you talk about the Kenyan system, you'll find that Kenya Power really hires a lot of these engineers. And again, Kenya Power is actually concerned with distribution engineers. So as a power systems engineer, you are going to find them in Kenya Power, but they are going to be concerned with the distribution. And distribution, as we said, it's installing and designing the installation of user transformers. So at the areas where we need to distribute power, say a new school, a new neighborhood that has started being occupied, they require a transformer. That is a distribution engineer that will be concerned with the distribution of power at level. But then we have another body that is called KETRACO. And sometimes in Kenya, we're talking about Kenya now in case. So we're saying Kenya Power is concerned with distribution. So I will say that is that bit. Then there is another body called KETRACO. So these are the people that receive power, or that power is generated at the generating stations, and they do the transmission. Assume this is your generating station, might be Masiga. I think I'm always given this example. And now we want to take it to the power substation. I don't know what we call them. Substation, where is power is before it starts getting distributed. So from Masiga all the way to Nairobi or Thika, where it's getting distributed, power is carried in terms of pylons, which are carrying the transmission lines. So these are very long distance and high voltage transmission lines. So those kind of engineers that do this kind of thing are called transmission engineers. They are falling under this category of power system engineer. So it is from that point, again, substations or distribution stations and transmission stations are normally done by power systems engineer. So again, talked in detail about the Kenyan system and said that transmission engineer is going to be done by KETRACO. Okay, so most of the transmission engineers are going to be hired by KETRACO. I think we also should mention that generation is also part of power system. So what we have talked about transmission. We have not talked about generation. So we have given KETRACO the transmission, the distribution. We have given it to Kenya Power. KPLC, they are the people who sell power to the general public. But then generation is done by the likes of KenGen. KenGen are the people who actually deal with Masiga, with Kidaruma, and other power stations. They are the people who generate power. And then there are also private power generating companies. They also sell power to Kenya Power, but then it is KETRACO that transmits it. So I think I have just highlighted this. What we are simply saying is that all that work is done by power systems engineer. And what we actually also find is that in our Kenyan systems, you are going to find many students prefer to do heavy option, because these companies that distribute power are quite many and heavy, and they hire a lot of people. A good number of engineers prefer to do this power system, because I think the job market is quite receptive for them. So, but I'm not saying that TIE are not covered there. They might find themselves here, but they might struggle because they might not get all the skills that they require for power systems. Yeah. So, as a matter of fact, I have seen in our university, you see like 70% of students choose heavy and 30% choose light. Not that one of them is better than the other. It's only that sometimes the job market is more receptive on power system engineers than light, because light is the people who hire light are the likes of Safaricom, Kenya Airtel, and Liquid Telecom, Jamii Telecom, among others. And they do not serve as a huge market as the market that is served by power companies. So that might also be also another reason why. But that is just Kenyan system. Then that is not the world. We are training engineers for the world, not just for the Kenyan system. So do not get discouraged. Pursue your passion as much as possible. Okay, so we are saying that power systems designs and plans the layout of generating plants. So we have said about generation, transmission, and distribution lines, receiving and distribution stations. The direct preparation of or prepares drawings and specific type of equipment, materials to be used in construction and equipment installation. They estimate labor, material, construction, and equipment costs. They inspect completed installations for conformance with the design and equipment specifications and standards, observes the operation of installation for conformance for operation of standards. So I think there are quite a number of them here, and they may be designing some other roles. Think about prepaid tokens that are sold by KPLC. Right now, most of the people, what they will do is that you buy prepaid, you receive a message as an SMS, and that message you enter it in the prepaid meter. But then I've also seen some other system in which when you buy and you enter your account number when you are buying, you don't even have to enter that number to the prepaid meter. So what they will just automatically recognize that you have paid, and it will top up your account. So that kind of a system falls under the category of distribution in the homes. There's a whole system specifications that are required for you to implement that kind of a prepaid system, and there's some safety standards again that are going to be followed. All that work is the work that falls under the category of our systems engineer. So it's a huge field, and as I have said in the past, electrical engineering is a huge field. It has so many roles that are required to be performed, and therefore all of us can find a place where we fit. Okay, the last thing is coordinates operation and maintenance activities to ensure that optimum of utilization of power system facilities and meet customer demands for electrical energy. They may also compile power rates and direct others in evaluating properties and developing utilities in new territories. Back of that is power systems, power system engineer. Now there is another one that is called engineer of system development. This is a general system engineer. We are saying that this person plans and coordinates activities to provide for orderly development and improve operating efficiency of electrical power system. So this person coordinates scheduling, conducting and analysis of special studies such as commercial and residential development in surrounding territory, population estimates, and facilities for interconnections with other power systems. So I think the key word here that that can guide us to discuss this engineer is the one that I have just seen here. That every area requires to be supplied power. There are some population estimate, and that guides which is the best location for instance, installing a transformer. And that kind of work can only be carried out by an engineer so that they know how well power is going to be distributed. And that again is a work that we are saying that is done by a system development engineer. So we are now starting to talk about communication engineering here. So we are calling them engineer in charge for studio operations. So this engineer directs and coordinates radio and television station activities, which are concerned with acquisition, installation, and maintenance, modification of radio broadcasting equipment. So, of course, in a serious station, and I know we have many now, but particularly in the old days, the days when you only had KBC or KTN, they required to transmit their signals themselves. And therefore, they required acquisition, installation, and maintenance, and even modification of the broadcasting equipment. So that work cannot be, particularly the acquisition. The engineers need to know which equipments are required to go to the regions that probably the TV broadcaster or radio broadcasting station requires to reach. And therefore, probably some regions might be mountainous, others might be hilly or plateau regions. And some of these regions might require different kinds of equipment that are dependent on the terrain of the region. Therefore, that kind of particularly acquisition and installation requires a specialist engineer so that they can choose and design each equipment for each area. Therefore, we are saying that you'd have an engineer that is called engineer in charge for studio operations, and you find those engineers, they are still there in the TV stations like ABC, KTN, among others. Those engineers evaluate studio needs for new broadcast equipment to determine if acquisition would be justified, considering such factors as cost, availability, or improvement in technical performance, and they are going to go as far as authorizing the acquisition of such equipment for evaluation. So engineers are always everywhere. Even today, as much as most of the new TV stations that are being set up nowadays, they are not having their own engineers because they are leasing or contracting other companies that are in charge of broadcasting. You can still know and understand that studio operations engineers are going to be required, particularly in that aspect where we are going to be choosing who is going to be supplying us the services of broadcasting. And therefore, at that point, we say that engineer in charge comes into play. The other task that we discuss is that they direct activities concerned with the layout and design of electrical circuitry for the acquired equipment to ensure that they conform with the codes of safety and standards that are required for such an installation. So they also establish procedures for operation and maintenance of studio, remote control, and microwave transmission equipment. They inspect and direct testing and maintenance of studio, remote, and airborne broadcasting equipment. They again ensure operational performance meets the company standards and rules and regulations of Communications Commission. They also develop modification plans for existing broadcasting equipment to improve technical performance. They direct modification and testing of equipment, among others. They prepare, repair, and maintenance schedule. So as much as they are not the ones who are going to be repairing, they are going to know that there is a maintenance schedule that must be kept so that at no point the broadcasting equipment fails because of any equipment requires to be serviced. And therefore, we are saying that even those schedules are required to be done. Power transmission engineer. This guys lay out and estimate the cost of transmission lines. This is power systems. So we had talked about general power system engineer, and now you're talking about, I'm writing heavy because heavy means power generation, power transmission, and distribution. So this falls under the category of power transmission. This is similar to the one that we have really discussed in length, that of power system engineer. But now in particular, this is purely dealing with transmission of power. So we're talking about laying out of plans and estimates for transmission lines. So these are the ones that I called high tension facilities for carrying out power from source to the distribution point. Just remember that these are the people who are concerned with designing transmission lines from the generating point to the distribution points. So they also visit proposed construction sites. They select best and shortest route. So you might think that the engineer are only dealing with power, but even the route where power passes to avoid interference with other lines, that is the work of a transmission engineer. They submit data on proposed route for right of way. Even for you to get the right of way to pass between the national park or another public facility, you require some right of way to be given, and that kind of right of way are going to be determined by the transmission engineers. They actually determine which are the best routes to use to transmit power. They also arrange the aerial, topographical, and other surveys to obtain pertinent data for planning purposes. So again, you can actually know that engineers require very broad knowledge in regard to transmission of power. They also devise the devices steel and wood supporting structures for cables and draw sketch showing their location. Even those pylons that we have talked about, it is work that is done by transmission engineers. They also perform detailed engineering calculations that support construction specifications such as cable sag. There are mathematics that they do. How much does a cable sag? The strength of a given pole, depending on how much lines or how many lines they are carrying, and even the distance between one pole to another, and how much grounding. They talk about grounding. Every pole or every pylon requires to be grounded, and grounded means if this is a transmission line, any distribution pole that supplies power to a house, there is always a wire that moves from this point to the ground. That is the one that is called grounding. Okay. And that kind of grounding reduces the amount of electric shock that someone would get if they were to be exposed to this wiring and transmission lines. We normally require to constantly provide grounding for even transmission lines. And there are even other points that we are saying that these engineers are concerned with. So I will not really spend too much time discussing that because we have discussed them in other power systems engineer. We are almost finishing, so don't get tired. We just have one more engineer to discuss, which is protection engineer. And we're saying that protection engineer plans layout and oversees maintenance of protection equipment of an electric power distribution system to minimize interruption to service and danger to lives and equipment from abnormalities such as overload, no load, or short circuit. Now think about this. In my old days when I was in college, about 10 or more years ago, I was in Nairobi, and there used to be very frequent power failure. Every time it is raining, power goes out, or there's a blackout. Okay, I think that is not happening quite often nowadays, but you still find in some areas that when there is some overloaded transformers, that every time it's evening, when most of the people are turning on their lights, the power runs out or there's a blackout. Those are system abnormalities that requires to be maintained, and that is the work that protection engineer does. They know how much power a given area or a given transformer or given equipment is allowed to draw, and how much is it drawing in reality, and they actually provide or plan and oversee protection of such equipment by providing safety standards that must be observed, prevent the danger that such abnormalities might cause, and even in terms of short circuit. So they also study drawings of power systems, and they make complex calculations to determine type, number, location, and correlation of protectors. Now talk about these items, and I think that this is the keyword that you need to understand. Talking about circuit breakers, fuses, and grounding devices. As I mentioned, some of the reasons why power gets out during rain is because there are some circuit breakers that are normally installed in distribution lines that get overly sensitive to effects like lightning or thunderstorms, that anytime they observe there is a likelihood of a short circuit arising from such natural phenomenon as lightning, then they will provide a circuit breaker that simply cuts off power, and therefore you find there is a blackout. So what we are simply saying is that engineers should actually do proper mathematics, the one we are calling complex calculations, so that they determine the number and location, so that the type of blackout that you face because of such natural phenomenon are reduced, or such to the optimal level, that only when it is dangerous are you going to have such a kind of a power breakout. Lastly, they plan adjustments, additions to protective system necessitated by increased demand. The protection engineer does all this, The plan adjustment and additions to protective system necessitated by increased demand in development of new residential areas and unusual requirements of heavy industry. For instance, if we have a new industry that has been erected in a given area, that industry might require a lot of power compared to what other residents were using. That would necessitate, the word here is you are planning what would necessitate there's some adjustment that would necessitate an additional transformer to be installed, because we are saying that there is an increased demand in a new residential area. So don't sometimes get lost in the role that you are going to be playing in this career that you have joined, which is that of electrical engineering. So there's so much work we are going to be doing, and so much potential. You don't have to do the one that is boring. You can always do the one that really excites you.